What if I told you that Princess Diana had a secret so shocking, it could have destroyed the monarchy? For 4 years, the world's most famous woman was living a double life. Every Tuesday, she vanished from the palace. No bodyguards, no staff, no witnesses. She was preparing for something so dangerous, so forbidden, that when she finally revealed it, 2,500 people gasped in unison. On December 23, 1985, at the Royal Opera House, Diana did something that made Prince Charles freeze in horror and caused 8 standing ovations. 3 minutes that changed everything. If you're obsessed with Diana's untold secrets like I am, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell, because I reveal the hidden truth behind every headline. You won't believe what really happened behind those palace walls. Let's expose the truth. September 1981, London City Ballet offices, just 2 months after the wedding of the century. The telephone call that would change everything came on a grey Tuesday morning when Aunt Allen was reviewing rehearsal schedules for the London City Ballet. The voice on the other end was crisp, formal, and utterly unexpected. "Miss Allen, this is the private secretary's office at Kensington Palace. Her Royal Highness the Princess of Wales would like to inquire about private dance instruction." And nearly dropped the phone. 2 months ago, the entire world had watched Lady Diana Spencer become Princess of Wales in the most spectacular royal wedding in modern history. Now, that same young woman, barely 20 years old and still adjusting to her new life, wanted to learn to dance? "The princess has specifically requested complete confidentiality," the voice continued. "These lessons would be entirely private, never appearing on any official schedules. Would you be available to meet with Her Royal Highness to discuss the arrangement?" 3 days later, and found herself in a discreet office at Kensington Palace, sitting across from the woman whose face had graced every magazine cover and newspaper front page for months. But the Diana she met was nothing like the confident bride the world had seen walking down the aisle of St. Paul's Cathedral. "I've always dreamed of dancing," Diana said softly, her hands folded carefully in her lap. "As a little girl, I took ballet lessons and dreamed of becoming a ballerina. But they told me I was too tall. At 5 feet 11 inches, I'd tower over any male partner." Her laugh was rueful, tinged with old disappointment. "When I was younger, I worked as a dance teacher at a nursery school," Diana continued, her voice growing stronger. "Those children, they moved with such freedom, such joy. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, about what it would feel like to move like that again." And studied the young princess carefully. Beneath the carefully styled hair and perfect makeup, she saw a young woman who looked overwhelmed, isolated, struggling to find her place in a world of rigid protocol and endless expectations. "Your Royal Highness," Anne said gently, "dancing isn't just about technique. It's about finding a way to express what's inside you. Is that what you're looking for?" Diana's eyes lit up for the first time during their conversation. "Yes," she whispered. "Exactly that. I feel like I'm disappearing into this role, into what everyone expects me to be. I need something that's just mine." They arranged to meet the following week at a private studio in West London, a nondescript building that would become Diana's sanctuary. The lessons would be conducted in absolute secrecy. No royal protection officers in the studio, no palace staff present, no official record of the appointments. "Dancing makes you feel heaps better," Diana confided as Anne walked her to the palace's private entrance. "At least, I hope it will." That first lesson was tentative, almost shy. Diana arrived wearing simple leg warmers, a pink leotard, and worn jazz shoes that she'd kept from her teaching days. As they began with basic warm-up exercises, and noticed how Diana carried herself, there was natural grace in her movements, but also a weight that seemed to press down on her shoulders. I gently noted that the head was the heaviest part of the body, and would later write in her memoir. I wanted her to feel the freedom that dance can give, and she did. By the end of that first hour, something had shifted. Diana's posture was more relaxed, her smile more genuine. As she prepared to leave, she turned to Anne with an expression of pure gratitude. "This is the first time in months that I've felt like myself," she said. "Can we do this again next week?" Over the following weeks, what had begun as simple dance instruction evolved into something far more profound. The studio became Diana's confessional, the one place where she could speak honestly about her struggles with royal life, her loneliness, her growing awareness that her fairy tale marriage was already showing cracks. "I just want to do something that's truly mine," Diana confided during their third lesson. Everything else belongs to the crown, to the public, to Charles. But when I'm dancing, when I'm moving to music, I feel like Diana again. Not the Princess of Wales, just me. And began to understand that these lessons were about far more than dance technique. They were about giving a young woman trapped in a golden cage 1 hour each week to spread her wings, to remember who she had been before the titles and tiaras transformed her into a symbol rather than a person. Neither of them could have imagined that these secret Tuesday afternoon sessions would continue for nearly a decade, building Diana's confidence and skill until she was ready to shock the world with an act of rebellion disguised as entertainment. But as Diana's technique improved and her confidence grew, she began to dream of something bigger than private lessons, something that would allow her to share this feeling of freedom with the world. 1981 to 1985, Private Dance Studio, West London. Every Tuesday at 2:30 p.m. for 4 years, the same scene unfolded in a converted warehouse in West London. A dark sedan would pull up to the curb, and a tall figure in sunglasses and a simple wool coat would slip through the unmarked door of building number 47. Inside, away from the cameras and crowds that defined her public life, Princess Diana would transform from royal icon to dedicated student. The studio had become her sanctuary, the one place in the world where she could exist simply as Diana, not as the Princess of Wales. Mirrors lined one wall, reflecting the bars and the worn wooden floor that had witnessed thousands of hours of practice. Here, surrounded by the tools of artistic expression, Diana found something that all the royal protocol and palace luxury couldn't provide: genuine freedom. Over hundreds of weekly 1-hour lessons that were never on the princess's official schedule, and Alan watched her royal pupil evolve from a hesitant beginner into a genuinely skilled dancer. But more importantly, she witnessed Diana's transformation from an overwhelmed young bride into a woman discovering her own strength and identity. Week after week, as they worked through increasingly complex routines, their relationship deepened far beyond teacher and student. The dance studio had become Diana's confessional, the one place where she could voice the struggles that threatened to suffocate her public persona. "I just can't seem to do anything right when it comes to my husband," Diana confided during a particularly difficult period in 1983. She was working on a contemporary sequence that required her to express vulnerability through movement, and the emotions were bleeding over into her words. "I do love him so much and want him to be proud of me, but I don't think he feels the same way." And continued to guide her through the combination, understanding that movement often helped Diana process emotions that were too painful to examine directly. "I don't understand why I am not enough for him," Diana whispered during a challenging turn sequence. "I think he prefers an older woman. Someone more sophisticated." By 1984, the conversations had become more specific, more heartbreaking. "I know he is seeing Camilla again," Diana admitted one day, her voice breaking as she attempted a particularly complex routine. "I found another letter in his jacket pocket. He's not even trying to hide it anymore." And also witnessed something remarkable: Diana's growing strength. The shy, uncertain young woman who had first walked into the studio was developing into someone with genuine confidence and artistic ability. Her natural grace, combined with years of intensive training, had given her skills that surprised even her teacher. She had natural style, and observed as Diana mastered increasingly difficult combinations. She could do the high kick, she could do a pirouette, and she had lovely swinging hips. She had that thing called charisma. She was charismatic, and even when she spoke with that very quiet voice, it was something that pulled you in. The dancing had given Diana something precious, a sense of her own power, her own identity beyond her royal role. In the mirror-lined studio, she saw not the Princess of Wales, but Diana, a talented performer with her own gifts to offer the world. As their sessions continued through 1984 and into 1985, Diana began to speak more confidently about her dreams. "Sometimes I imagine what it would be like to dance in front of an audience," she confided during one lesson. "To share this feeling of freedom with other people, to show them that I'm more than just a pretty face in a tiara. Dancing gives me the only hour each week where I feel completely myself," Diana told, and as they worked on a particularly expressive contemporary piece. "Everything else in my life is choreographed by other people. Where I go, what I say, how I stand, even how I smile. But here, I get to choose how to move." And could see something changing in her student as 1985 progressed. There was a new energy in Diana's movements, a growing confidence that went beyond technical improvement. During one autumn session, Diana paused in the middle of a jazz routine and turned to her teacher with an expression and had never seen before. Mischievous, determined, almost rebellious. "You know," Diana said thoughtfully, "Charles goes to the Royal Opera House every year for that Christmas gala. He sits in the royal box, watching other people perform, other people express their passion through movement. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if I surprised him. What would happen if I showed the world that I can do more than just cut ribbons and wave at crowds?" And felt a chill of excitement mixed with concern. "What are you thinking, Diana?" Diana's smile was radiant, filled with the confidence that 4 years of secret training had given her. "I'm thinking it's time to show them what I can really do. I want to dance on that stage, and I want to dance at the Royal Opera House." The idea was audacious, unprecedented, potentially scandalous. It was also, and realized, exactly the kind of bold move that the confident woman Diana had become would be brave enough to attempt. But turning that dream into reality would require help from someone with professional stage experience, someone willing to risk their own reputation to help a princess break free from her golden cage. November 1985, Kensington Rehearsal Studio. The secret meeting that would change royal history forever took place in a nondescript rehearsal studio that Wayne Sleep used for private practice. Diana had spent weeks planning this encounter, knowing that what she was about to propose would either be dismissed as the fantasy of a bored princess or embraced as the audacious artistic collaboration of the decade. Wayne Sleep, at 5 feet 2 inches, was the shortest male dancer in royal ballet history, but he had transformed what many saw as a disadvantage into his greatest strength. His unconventional height had led choreographers to create unique roles for him, and his move from classical ballet to musical theater, where he originated the role of Mr. Mistopheles in Cats, had made him one of Britain's most recognizable performers. When Sleep walked into the studio that Tuesday afternoon, he found Princess Diana waiting for him, dressed not in royal finery but in the practical uniform of a serious dancer: pink leotard, black tights, leg warmers, and well-worn jazz shoes. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of the careful makeup she wore for public appearances. "This will never work, ma'am. You're so much taller than me," Sleep said immediately, his practical dancers' eye immediately noting the dramatic height difference between them. "I walked in and I looked up at this towering sort of goddess above me and I thought, this isn't going to work, it'll be hysterically funny." But Diana was ready for his objections. She had spent months thinking through every possible challenge, every potential obstacle. "You know, I've been up very late last night thinking about this," Sleep continued, settling into a chair to consider the logistics. "Do you mind if I sit down for a moment?" "No, not at all, you naughty boy," Diana replied with a grin that completely transformed her face. In that instant, the formal distance between royalty and subject evaporated. "From that moment, we started giggling and laughing," Sleep would later recall. "We had the same schoolboy humor," Sleep explained years later. "I was her sort of jester in a way, but we did get on incredibly well. We had something that clicked." Diana had come prepared with more than just enthusiasm. She had a complete vision for what she wanted to achieve. She'd already decided on the music: Billy Joel's Uptown Girl. There was a music video that went with the song, and she must have seen the video. There's a lovely lady with a hat. She's very chic and gets out of a car. Diana knew she could play that role of sophistication. The choice was inspired. Uptown Girl was energetic, contemporary, and completely unexpected for a royal performance. It was rebellious without being inappropriate, sophisticated while still being playful. Most importantly, it was Diana's choice, one of the few artistic decisions in her life that wouldn't be filtered through committees, advisors, or royal protocol. "I want to dance with you at Covent Garden this Christmas," Diana explained, her voice growing stronger as she outlined her plan. "For the big Christmas gala party that they do as a thank you to all the supporters of the Opera House. It's the perfect opportunity. Charles will be there in the royal box, completely unsuspecting." Sleep was genuinely stunned. "I thought she must be crazy," he would later admit. The Princess of Wales wanted to perform on stage at the Royal Opera House? In front of 2,500 of Britain's most influential people? The idea was revolutionary, unprecedented, potentially career-ending for both of them. "But we'll need absolute secrecy," Diana emphasized, her tone becoming deadly serious. "Charles cannot know about this. No one at the palace can know. If word gets out before the performance, they'll find a way to stop it. This has to be our secret until the moment I step onto that stage." Over the following weeks, They developed a routine that showcased both their strengths while playing with their obvious differences. The routine had a bit of everything: jazz, ballet, even a kickline, Sleep recalled. Diana's natural grace and 4 years of intensive training with Alan had given her genuine skill, while Sleep's theatrical background brought the showmanship and precise timing that would make their performance unforgettable. She had natural style, Sleep observed as they worked together. She could do the high kick, she could do a pirouette, and she had lovely swinging hips. She had that thing called charisma. She was charismatic, and even when she spoke with that very quiet voice, it was something that pulled you in and you just wanted to embrace her all the time. But the technical choreography was only part of the challenge. They also had to plan the complex logistics of the actual performance. How would Diana get from the royal box to backstage without being noticed? What would she wear that would allow for both royal elegance and dance movement? How would they signal each other during the performance? What if something went wrong? On the night, "I'll go on stage first," Sleep explained as they worked through the timing. "The audience will think they're getting a standard ballet piece. When you see me look toward the wings, that's your cue. Walk on confidently. Don't hesitate, don't look nervous. You belong there." Diana felt a thrill of excitement mixed with genuine terror. But what if I forget the steps? What if I fall? What if Charles is furious? What if the palace tries to stop me from ever performing again? "Then at least you'll have tried," Sleep said simply. "At least you'll have had one moment where you were completely yourself, where you showed the world who Diana really is underneath all the royal protocol." As December approached, both dancers knew there was no turning back. Diana had crossed a line from dreaming about artistic expression to planning an act of rebellion that would be seen by thousands and reported around the world. In just weeks, Diana would either triumph as an artist in her own right or face consequences that could reshape her relationship with the royal family forever. December 23, 1985, Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, 8:45 p.m. The Royal Opera House stood like a temple to the arts in the heart of London's Covent Garden, its red brick facade glowing under the December evening lights. Inside the magnificent Victorian Theatre, 2,500 of Britain's most distinguished guests had gathered for the annual Friends of Covent Garden Gala, an exclusive evening designed to thank the patrons who supported the Royal Ballet throughout the year. Crystal chandeliers cast warm golden light over the red velvet seats and ornate gilt boxes, while the air hummed with sophisticated conversation in a dozen languages. This was British high society at its most refined. Cabinet ministers chatted with business leaders, titled aristocrats mingled with celebrated artists, and everyone who was anyone in London's cultural world had gathered to celebrate another successful year for the Royal Ballet. In the Royal Box, positioned prominently in the center of the theater's horseshoe-shaped balcony, Prince Charles and Princess Diana sat side by side, the very picture of royal elegance. Charles wore his formal evening dress with military decorations that caught the light when he moved, while Diana had chosen a stunning midnight blue gown that complemented the sapphires at her throat, a deliberate choice, as the ensemble had been specifically selected for ease of removal when the time came. To the audience below, they appeared to be the perfect royal couple, attentively watching the varied performances that ranged from classical ballet excerpts to contemporary dance pieces. Charles seemed particularly engaged, leaning forward slightly during an especially challenging pas de deux, his genuine appreciation for the arts evident in his focused attention and precise applause. But Diana's mind was elsewhere entirely. Her hands, elegantly gloved in white silk, gripped her evening purse so tightly that her knuckles showed white beneath the fabric. Inside that purse, carefully folded and ready, was a satin dress she had specially commissioned for tonight, a below-the-knee creation in flowing fabric that would allow for the freedom of movement she would soon need. The evening's program had been carefully orchestrated by the Royal Opera House, but Diana knew something the rest of the audience didn't. There would be one more performance tonight, one that wasn't listed in the elegant programs that rustled softly throughout the theater as guests followed along with each piece. As the current ballet excerpt concluded to enthusiastic applause, Diana felt her heart rate accelerate. She had been preparing for this moment for months, years really, if she counted all the secret lessons with Alan, but now that it was here, the magnitude of what she was about to do threatened to overwhelm her. This wasn't just about dancing. This was about claiming her own identity in front of the very establishment that sought to control every aspect of her life. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Diana tried to focus on the performances, tried to maintain the composed expression that years of royal training had taught her, but her mind kept racing through the choreography she and Wayne had rehearsed so carefully. Every step, every turn, Every moment of their routine had been practiced until it was muscle memory, but performing in front of 2,500 people, including her husband, would be entirely different from their secret rehearsals. Finally, as the penultimate piece of the evening concluded, Diana knew the moment had arrived. "I need to powder my nose," she whispered to Charles, leaning close enough that her words wouldn't carry to the other occupants of the royal box. Charles nodded absently, his attention already turning to the program notes for the next performance. Diana rose gracefully, her years of deportment training ensuring that even this simple movement appeared elegant and unhurried. She made her way toward the back of the box, where a discreet door led to a private corridor used exclusively by the royal family during their visits to the opera house. But instead of turning toward the ladies' room, Diana took a route she had memorized during previous visits to the opera house. The corridors backstage were a maze of narrow passages, costume rooms, and practice spaces, but she navigated them with the confidence of someone who had planned every step of this journey. Her heart was pounding as she reached the small dressing room where her costume change awaited. In a matter of minutes, she had transformed from royal patron to performer, the midnight blue gown replaced by the flowing satin dress that would allow her to move freely. Her jewelry was reduced to simple earrings, her hair quickly adjusted to withstand the movement of dance. Wayne Sleep was waiting in the wings, dressed in an elegant costume that complemented the theatrical nature of their planned performance. He had been pacing nervously, occasionally peering out at the audience through a gap in the heavy stage curtains, trying to gauge the mood of the crowd. "Are you ready?" he whispered as Diana approached, and he was struck by the transformation he saw. Gone was the nervous young woman who had first proposed this audacious plan. In her place stood a performer, confident, radiant, and completely committed to what they were about to do. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," Diana replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. On stage, the Master of Ceremonies was announcing the final piece of the evening, a special performance by Wayne Sleep, one of Britain's most celebrated dancers. The audience applauded politely, settling back in their seats and expecting another classical ballet variation to close out the evening. "On the night, I was first on stage," Sleep would later recall. "There was a big round of applause and I thought, you ain't seen nothing yet." As the opening notes of Billy Joel's Uptown Girl suddenly filled the opera house, completely unexpected, thoroughly contemporary, utterly unlike anything that had been performed that evening, Sleep glanced toward the wings where Diana stood waiting. In the royal box, Charles frowned slightly, his head tilting as he tried to place the familiar melody that was so completely out of place in this classical setting. And then Diana stepped into the lights, and the world changed forever. The moment that would define her legacy, shock the establishment, and prove that even a princess could break free from her golden cage was about to begin. Royal Opera House Stage, December 23, 1985, 9:32 p.m. The moment Princess Diana stepped into the spotlight, the Royal Opera House fell into a silence so profound it seemed as if 2,500 people had simultaneously forgotten how to breathe. For a heartbeat that stretched into eternity, the most famous woman in the world stood poised on the stage of Britain's most prestigious venue, and nobody, not the distinguished guests, not the seasoned performers watching from the wings, not even the orchestra, could quite process what they were seeing. Princess Diana, the woman they had watched walk down the aisle of St. Paul's Cathedral 4 years earlier in the wedding of the century, the mother of the future king, the future Queen of England herself, was standing on the stage of the Royal Opera House in a flowing satin dress, ready to dance. There was a gasp from the audience, of 2,500 people, who took an intake of breath all at the same time. They were speechless, Wayne Sleep would later recall. The audience gasped when Diana appeared, as if they'd all taken one huge breath. But Diana didn't hesitate. Every hour of secret training with Aunt Alan, every carefully rehearsed session with Wayne Sleep, every moment of doubt and determination had led to this instant. As Billy Joel's Uptown Girl continued to fill the ornate theater with its unexpectedly contemporary sound, she moved with a confidence that stunned everyone watching. This wasn't the sometimes awkward young woman who had stumbled through her early public appearances, looking uncertain and overwhelmed by the cameras and crowds. This wasn't the princess who often seemed to disappear behind her formal duties and careful smiles. This was Diana the performer, radiant, powerful, completely in her element and utterly fearless. The routine had a bit of everything: jazz, ballet, even a kickline, Sleep remembered. The choreography they had developed over weeks of secret rehearsals played perfectly to Diana's natural grace while incorporating the theatrical flair and precise timing that made Wayne Sleep one of Britain's most celebrated performers. "At one point, I pirouette and she pushed me down," Then I carried her across the stage. I remember thinking, don't drop the future Queen of England. Diana executed each movement with a precision and joy that revealed years of serious training. Her jazz technique, honed through hundreds of sessions with and Alan, showed in the fluid grace of her arm movements and the perfect timing of her steps. Her classical ballet background was evident in her flawless posture and the elegant lines she created with her body. But it was her natural charisma, that indefinable quality that had made her a global icon, that truly captivated the audience. She had that thing called charisma, Sleep observed years later. She was charismatic, and even when she spoke with that very quiet voice, it was something that pulled you in and you just wanted to embrace her all the time. The 3-minute routine showcased aspects of Diana's personality that years of carefully scripted public appearances had never revealed. When she kicked her leg high in the air during the jazz sequence, the audience saw her playfulness and athleticism. When she spun effortlessly in Sleep's arms, they witnessed her trust and complete abandon to the music. When she smiled broadly during the final moments, they glimpsed the genuine happiness and freedom that had been so often missing from her public persona. Everyone's mouths gaped open, Sleep said. There was an intake of breath like they couldn't believe it. The noise got bigger and bigger. But in the royal box, a very different scene was unfolding. Prince Charles sat frozen, his face a carefully controlled mask that revealed absolutely nothing of what he was thinking or feeling. According to royal biographer Tina Brown, who interviewed several witnesses to that night, Charles was cool and detached, his body language speaking volumes to those who knew how to read royal disapproval. It was embarrassingly clear that he had not been ravished by the spectacle of his wife. The contrast between the two audiences, the 2,500 people in the theater and the one man in the royal box, couldn't have been more stark. Below, distinguished guests were rising to their feet, applauding wildly, some even calling out in appreciation. Above, the future King of England sat rigidly upright, his hands moving in only the barest minimum of polite applause required by protocol. As the music reached its crescendo, Diana and Wayne moved into their spectacular final sequence, a series of turns, lifts, and synchronized movements that brought them to center stage with arms raised in triumph. The audience erupted into the kind of sustained applause usually reserved for the greatest opera performances. We did 8 curtain calls, Sleep recalled with amazement, his voice still filled with wonder years later. At the end of the performance, royal protocol demanded that all performers bow to the royal box as a sign of respect to the monarchy. I said, "By the way, you've got to bow to the royal box," Sleep whispered to Diana as they prepared for their final acknowledgement of the audience. Diana's response revealed everything about her state of mind in that moment of triumph. And she said, "I'm not bowing to him, he's my hubby." And so I made her turn and bow, and as we ran off she went, "You won't get your OBE, Order of the British Empire, that way." Even in her moment of artistic triumph, Diana couldn't resist a small act of rebellion, followed immediately by her characteristic humor and genuine concern for others. It was quintessentially Diana, breaking rules while worrying about the consequences for those around her. As they walked off stage together, both performers were practically glowing with adrenaline and accomplishment. She loved it, Sleep remembered. For 3 magical minutes, Diana had been completely, authentically herself, not the Princess of Wales performing royal duties, not Charles's wife fulfilling expectations, not the mother of future kings carrying the weight of the monarchy. She had been Diana the artist, expressing her soul through movement and sharing that joy with an audience that understood and celebrated what they had witnessed. A few days later, Sleep received a letter from his star pupil. "Now I understand the buzz you get from performing," she wrote. But as the curtain fell and the audience continued to cheer, neither Diana nor Wayne could have predicted that those 3 minutes of artistic freedom would come at a personal cost that would echo through Diana's life for years to come. The morning after, December 24, 1985, Kensington Palace. Diana woke before dawn on Christmas Eve, her body still humming with the electric energy of the previous night's performance. For those first blissful moments between sleep and full consciousness, she relived every second, the warmth of the stage lights on her face, the thunderous applause that seemed to go on forever, the pure joy of moving to music while 2,500 people watched in delighted amazement. But reality returned with the sound of rain against her bedroom windows and the memory of the Arctic silence that had filled the royal car during the ride back to Kensington Palace. Charles had left the royal box immediately after her performance, declining to attend the traditional after-party where performers mingled with patrons and accepted congratulations. The journey home had been conducted in a silence so complete that even the usually chatty protection officers had seemed afraid to speak. By 7 a.m., the phones at Kensington Palace were ringing incessantly. Word of the Princess of Wales's surprise performance had spread through London's social circles like wildfire, and by morning, photographers who had been present at the gala were offering their images to newspapers around the world. Within hours, photos of Diana dancing would appear on front pages from London to Tokyo, some praising her spirit and authenticity, others criticizing what they called an unprecedented breach of royal dignity. "Diana dances into controversy," screamed the headline of one tabloid. "The People's Princess takes the stage," proclaimed another, more sympathetically. But perhaps the most telling coverage came from the society pages and royal correspondence, where carefully worded accounts of Prince Charles's reaction began to emerge. According to royal biographer Tina Brown, who interviewed multiple witnesses to that evening, despite 8 curtain calls from an audience of 2,500 people, Charles had not stood during the applause. His body language had been interpreted by those who witnessed it as frigid disapproval of Diana's lapse in royal etiquette. Royal expert Richard Kay, who would later become one of Diana's closest confidants in the media, observed years later, "It was a present which slightly backfired. She did it as a tribute to Charles." Charles wasn't terribly impressed. The palace's official response was carefully neutral, a brief statement acknowledging that the princess had participated in the evening's entertainment and expressing appreciation for the support shown to the royal ballet. But behind the closed doors of Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace, the reaction was far more severe. Senior courtiers were appalled. How could the future queen have participated in what they saw as an undignified theatrical stunt? What message did this send about the monarchy's commitment to tradition and protocol? Most concerning of all, how had such a significant breach of royal etiquette been planned and executed without their knowledge or approval? But Diana had achieved something far more profound than anyone, including her critics, fully understood in those first hours after her performance. She loved the freedom dancing gave her, Wayne Sleep observed, and that freedom had been visible to everyone who watched her move across the stage of the Royal Opera House. For years, the British public had seen Diana at state dinners and charity galas, always beautifully dressed, always perfectly composed, but often appearing somewhat distant or uncertain in her role. On that stage, they had witnessed something entirely different, a young woman expressing her authentic self through movement, radiating a confidence and joy that seemed to transform her from royal symbol back into human being. The performance marked a crucial turning point in how the public perceived Diana, and perhaps more importantly, in how she saw herself. No longer was she simply Charles's wife, or William's mother, or the Princess of Wales. She was Diana, a woman with her own talents, her own passions, her own artistic vision that existed completely independent of her royal title. And Alan, who had guided Diana through 4 years of secret preparation, understood the deeper significance of what had happened. "Dancing makes you feel heaps better," Diana had told her during one of their early sessions, and that philosophy had sustained her through the darkest periods of her increasingly troubled marriage. But the Royal Opera House performance was more than just personal therapy made public. It was an act of quiet but unmistakable rebellion. In a world where every aspect of her life was controlled, choreographed, and approved by others, Diana had found a way to reclaim her autonomy. For 3 minutes, she had been the author of her own story, the creator of her own art, the director of her own destiny. She had stepped outside the carefully constructed boundaries of her royal role and discovered that the world celebrated her for who she truly was, not just for what she represented. The consequences of that rebellion would follow Diana for the rest of her life. The establishment never quite forgave what they saw as a breach of dignity, and Charles's public disapproval cast a long shadow over their already troubled relationship. But Diana had tasted something irreplaceable, the knowledge that she could step outside the constraints of her role and still be loved, perhaps even more deeply loved, for her authenticity. Wayne Sleep remained Diana's friend until her death in 1997, and their partnership at the Royal Opera House became the stuff of legend. "I felt like we were two loners who had found each other," Sleep reflected years later. "We both understood what it meant to perform, to give yourself completely to an audience and trust them to catch you." The performance lasted only 3 minutes, but its impact was eternal. Diana had proven that authentic self-expression could triumph over artificial constraint, that genuine emotion could move people more powerfully than perfect protocol. Her legacy lives on in every act of courage, every moment of authenticity, every dance of freedom that refuses to be contained by others' expectations. For the 2,500 people who witnessed it that December night, Diana's dance became a cherished memory of the moment when a princess stepped down from her pedestal and reminded the world that even royalty could be beautifully, rebelliously, authentically human. If Diana's courage to be herself in the face of overwhelming pressure inspired you, like this video and subscribe for more untold stories from behind the palace walls. Hit that notification bell so you never miss the moments when ordinary people, even princesses, choose to be extraordinary. Diana's legacy reminds us that our greatest power lies not in conforming to others' expectations, but in having the courage to dance to our own music, even when the whole world is watching. What's your Royal Opera House moment? When will you choose authenticity over approval? Let us know in the comments below.